And we're live. This is Maha Beli from Virtually Connecting, and I'm here in Egypt with my little girl. And we're virtually connecting with the Social Media in Higher Education Conference. Is that right, Sue?
That's right.
Right. So I'll ask Sue, Eric, and Mira to introduce themselves, and then our virtual participants to introduce themselves. And then we'll start talking to Eric.
Okay, let's go. So hi everybody, I'm Sue Beckingham from Sheffield Hallam University, which is where this is being hosted. So I'm Sue Becks on Twitter, and I'd like to introduce Eric.
Oh, well, thanks, Sue. My name's Eric Stoller. I'm a higher education consultant and writer and speaker. I write for InsideHigherEd.com, and I just had the pleasure to give the opening keynote here at Sheffield Hallam University for their Social Media for Learning in Higher Education conference.
I'm Mira Bogle. I work at UCL. I'm called an e-learning facilitator, and I'm here as a delegate.
Great. Teresa, Maha, and Claudie, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Claudie.
Hi, my name's Claudie Combalas. I'm the head of alumni engagement at the University of Warwick, and the reason I wanted to join in with this is I heard Eric speak to our marketing people a couple of weeks back, and thought what he had to say was fascinating, and I wanted to find out a bit more and perhaps how we could support alumni and learning as well.
Nice.
I'm Teresa McKinnon. I work at the same institution as Claudie. I'm Principal Teaching Fellow for the School of Modern Languages and Cultures. I've interacted with probably most of the people here at various times, both in real life and through Twitter and through various networks. I had a fascinating interview the other day with one of Sue's students on Skype.
Thank you for that.
Research. It was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm afraid she's got way too much data now to sift through, but it was great fun. And Maha and I met through a network called the Cleveland Network. For the past 5 years, I've been working professionally using computer-mediated communication to unite language learners. And connecting with France, which has then become a connection with Poland, with Egypt, with teachers all over the world, literally forming networks and finding connections and helping students navigate the digital.
Okay, my turn. My name is Maha Abdelmonem. I'm also from Cairo, Egypt. I'm an independent learning and development consultant. I've been working as a trainer, instruction designer, coach since '92. And currently I'm also a volunteer teacher of English and sometimes computers, like just beginners. I love learning, and I love I'm very interested in the field of education and how to improve it, because we have, in my opinion, we have a broken one in Egypt. So that's why I love always to connect with educators and learn from them and with them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So Eric, I've been following the Twitter stream, so I have a little inkling of what you were talking about at the conference. And one of the things I'm intrigued about was the introduction to your keynote. I heard there was a Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
Can I know a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, so I just made a quick video in iMovie with the sort of traditional crawl, the yellow text on a black background. iMovie, ironically enough, has that built in as an option, and so you can make I think it was like 2.5, 3 minutes long, and it took me maybe 30 minutes to make, and you can just create this really quickly, and I love that. Just being able to create and make something new for a presentation, I think, is just, you almost get to express yourself artistically in addition to the stuff that you're going to share via spoken word. So yeah, there was it's up on YouTube. It's up on, if you look at my YouTube channel, it's a public video now. Just feel free to watch it over and over again if you want. Yeah, it's a big day. Star Wars is out now, so it's good.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is someone in front of you talking to you now? Because you all looked up.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Sorry.
apparently, breaking news from
Say hello,
Sheffield.
come
We
say
just
hello.
got stickers, Star Wars stickers, which my wife has actually banned Star Wars conversations, music, all media in the household, because I think she knew that her husband had some fandom about Star Wars, but had no idea about the level that I harbor within. So yeah, it's this. By the way, gotta say, shout out to Helen back here behind me. She's the like brains behind this entire event, running the show.
Yeah, brain cell maybe.
She's made
Hi,
it.
Helen. We're live. Nice to see you.
See you. I'm going to go and see the rest of the conference, the physical conference, and I'll see you later. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll ask Sue and Mira, what did you think were the highlights of Eric's talk?
Eric highlighted all the things that I've been passionate about for such a long time, and it's just great to have other people's voices to talk about the importance of social media for connecting, and as been mentioned already, building our networks so we can learn from each other, we can listen and learn from each other. I think was a key message. So even if you're new to social media, you can listen in. This bandied word lurking should be thrown away, because I think listening is the most important thing, and it's what we do as children, and it's how we learn, and that's exactly what you do through social media. So you can go to these spaces and start to pick up some really interesting things. But of course that takes patience and time, and sometimes that seems to be a barrier for people. But you gave some really good examples of lots of different tools. LinkedIn and Twitter, I think, were the key main ones professionally that have been useful to you, and certainly I would advocate both of those. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most thought-provoking things for me was when you were talking about your mum and your mum joining you on Facebook, and because she didn't have a Facebook history, she was seeing really everything. There were no filters. So Eric's mum, came in to defend you, didn't she, against some kind of fairly light-hearted banter. Yeah. I had that impression, and I think this is really key for me, because I don't think that the social and the professional, we haven't really found a way to bring those together yet. And I think this is something that we're handling at the moment by probably don't ask, don't tell in some ways. It's kind of bubbling to the surface a little bit in the safe spaces debate in the States, I think. The other thing I really enjoyed was, I think you were kind of making reference to communities of practice, really, and how, and it's like you said, Sue, you can learn so much by watching successful social media users and successful social networkers going about their business, and how they start conversations, how they sustain them, how they bring in others. And we have some, really talented people like the Mahas and Teresa, and I know some of you from Twitter already. So, I know I've learned a lot from watching what you've done and the things that have worked so well. So, yeah, those things.
I think the other thing is that it's kind of a reminder that we have to keep reassuring other people that are new to using social media to say, we were just like you, but it was a few years ago now. But we were nervous, and I can remember, well, it's still there now actually on my timeline on Facebook. If you go back to the beginning, your first few posts, and my daughter actually saying, "Are you all right, Mum?" And I says, "Oh, I posted something on this Facebook thing," and she was really concerned, and she was commenting. So you forget how you were. Those they seem millions of steps away now. So it's just reassuring people that you don't just get on here and be confident. And I think you mentioned that yourself, didn't you? That it took you a while really to, and I think Twitter possibly is the one that takes the longest to get. And I always say it's only as good as the people that you follow, and you have to decide who's going to be useful for your personal learning network and adapt that, and that in itself takes time.
And so, Eric, what are your biggest tips for older academics or academics who aren't used to this?
tips for academics who aren't maybe as savvy with social. Yeah, it's interesting too. I think that for me, it's always about sort of just an individual's comfort level, and the spectrum of fluency when it comes to social media use. It spans all ages and experience. There are academics who are probably nearing the end of their career who are amazing on social media, and there are newer academics sort of beginning to establish themselves who maybe are a little bit more skeptical or apprehensive about using social media. And I think that the key for me is sort of having those conversations with the individuals who are skeptical to connect with them in a way that doesn't feel like they're being forced to do it. For example, as Sue mentioned from myself with Twitter, it took me 2.5 years before I really ever figured out the value of Twitter. And I think part of that was because the community was sort of figuring out the value of Twitter, so there wasn't a lot of value early on. But I think it's sort of, we do ourselves a disservice when we sort of say incoming academics or younger academics already get social media and older academics don't. I think that sort of polarizes the conversation, and it shuts down that sort of that joy of learning that should exist within anyone who works within higher education. I mean, because that's what this is all about. And so for me, how do you build up that sense of joy around, hey, social media has value for you, and the value for you might not ever materialize in the classroom, because maybe you're using it for professional development and networking or connecting with colleagues or doing events like this, and then maybe eventually you will sort of introduce it into your practice. And I think that we have to allow people to have the time to grow and mature and evolve their own style, because communications, you can't sort of mandate communications. Everybody does it their own way. And I think, for example, I've been blogging since 2004. That's 11 years now of blogging, of figuring out the sort of the way it works and the social norms of it and how to share this or that and get voice and tone and style. And I think we just have to allow people to have the space to grow and experiment and not feel like we're judging them for not knowing how to do something. I think that's really important.
I have a question actually, because as Sue mentioned that of course, I mean, you make decisions on how you're following and how they're adding value or you're adding value to them. So do you think that it's a good idea or to separate the professional from the personal on the social networks? Because I don't do that on purpose, but sometimes it happens, and I feel that there is a difference in how things go on those social medias that are separated versus the ones that are combined. So what do you think?
I think some of that's about personal style and preference. I think that I get asked this question a lot. I think it's the question that sort of always comes up in a conversation of this nature, because everybody wants to know, sort of what's the acceptable practice or sort of the premier way of operating. And I think that your handle is @TrabyMechanic, and you give away absolutely nothing as to who you are in person. And well, to those who know you,
my name's on my bio.
Yeah. See, I couldn't even be bothered to read the bio. I just
it's not obvious, is it?
yeah.
Right.
And I think
like Eric, I couldn't see your. I mean, your name is right there, but I didn't realize what that was.
Yeah, and so I think that it kind of goes back to that conversation around privacy, and everybody sets their privacy settings on social media based on their own comfort level, and I think that goes hand in hand with the professional personal sort of split, because there is no real split. We all exist as holistic human beings, and sometimes we're communicating in professional circles, sometimes we're communicating in personal circles, and then sometimes social media says, guess what, those things are all going to overlap and blend together. And so for me, for example, I have my Instagram and Facebook pretty much locked down, and have very few connections on those sites because I choose to have it that way. And on Twitter, I'm much more out there and open and sharing a lot more sort of work-oriented things, but I'll also share ridiculous things and funny things, and that works for me in my context, sort of my life context. And I think that everyone's context is different in terms of the things they're going to share, the things they're going to promote, and the platforms they're going to use.
And I think that social aspect, on Twitter, it shows a bit of personality about yourself as well, so it is okay to do that. I think where it crosses the line is where people are talking as if they were talking in the pub or something like that, and they're talking about the football match, and then they start swearing and they forget actually they're in a public space, and you have a megaphone with Twitter in reality, so anybody can find it and hear the things that you're saying, and that can get a little bit too much. And if you compare it to, I always think about being on a train as an example. When people answer the mobile phone, within seconds they're in this bubble and they have forgotten that there are people around them, and they continue to have a conversation, talking about things that they really shouldn't let other people. And it's just that you lose where you are sometimes. The fact that you just think you're having that conversation with one or maybe a couple of people.
Yeah, it's a kind of, in some ways, I think the people who do that are bizarrely humble, because I think they think that they don't, that no one's looking.
Yes.
It's kind of privacy through obscurity, but of course, it is basically public, and it's okay for anyone to look at those discussions. But I mean, I don't think I have any answers. I always say to myself, I lend work my Twitter account. I used to have more Twitter accounts, but it didn't work for me. So I lend work my Twitter account sometimes. I kind of have a soft rule that it's within working hours, some probably work-related tweeting, but in practice, both of those things move around, and I'm definitely aware of litigation against people on the basis of social media activity, and people have lost their jobs over it. So I think you become more confident and more prepared to share bits of your personality if you understand the regulations. And the law. And I think these are basic, this is one aspect of what people call, digital fluencies or digital literacy. So
I think the old guidance that, if you wouldn't share it and let your grandma hear it or your boss, then don't put it out there is good rule of thumb to follow.
Or your mom. Or your mom, if your mom's on fire.
Yeah, or your dad. I mean, I think that my mom actually probably, she's still figuring out what she's going to say on social media, but she'll probably say some interesting things, and she's kind of a character. Where did I come from? And so the other thing I think too is it's important to recognize the social media guidelines and policies of your institution or your organization, because you don't want to be sort of incongruent with the organizational culture, especially the organizational communications culture within your institution, because that can really be important too to look at. And that's important just to look at from a do I want to work here perspective when you're looking for places to go for new employment. I also wanted to point out there was a tweet from an individual that just came in. He said, we're sort of talking about engaging with students, and I think it sort of plays well into this conversation around personal, professional. And he says, engage with students on LinkedIn. I totally agree. I feel people won't connect if it says you're a student. Which, when I'm walking around at a campus and sometimes people will say, well, you look like a student, I always take that as like the highest compliment, because, yeah, I'm still learning, and thanks for saying that I look like a student. I think that, we were role modeling what it means to be a full person on social media to our students and to our colleagues, and I think that when we have this conversation around sort of splitting ourselves into more than one account or personal, professional, I'm of the, and I know this is a Star Wars oriented event, but I'm of the sort of Tolkien-esque one social media account to rule them all attitude or mindset, because again, that's how you sort of roll what it means to walk all those spheres, to be in all those spaces. As well, but like you said, to sort of modulate based on the day. I mean, during the day, it's mostly business, but hey, when Eurovision was on, I tweeted like 100 times because it was the first time I ever watched it. And if my followers didn't like that, they didn't have to pay attention then. They could always come back, put me on mute or unfollow, and then maybe come back later. It's fine.
Yeah.
This isn't an endorsement for Eurovision, by the way. It's pretty bad.
Ironically, Eurovision was one of the sort of turning points in the use of Twitter, because when I started using Twitter many years ago on my personal identity rather than my work identity, Eurovision was one of those moments when the language community coheres, and all of a sudden we have lots of linguists talking about, you know, this year, for example, what a shame it was that most of the songs were in English, and how we'd lost our acceptance and interest in the exoticism of having many, many languages. You know, to listen to Finnish being sung, to listen to Estonian. These were opportunities that Eurovision always gave the linguistic community. So you could see the community coalesce around that, the language teaching community. And that's still very much a moment for me around Eurovision. I very much agree with many of the things that have been said, but as linguists, we're very used to navigating cultural difference. This is what we do. We go and live abroad, we understand how to move into a third persona. So we see difference, we come from a different place, and we draw these things together and navigate into a third persona, a person that's not a native of that particular country, not a native speaker, but has to be able to interact efficiently and effectively in that new culture. We're used to taking students on that journey. And the most scary thing from my perspective when I started looking at this was that I was seeing linguists deciding that communication that happens in the face-to-face is more valid than communication that happens in virtual spaces. That's very scary. We have to embrace wherever communication happens, because what we do is help people bridge cultures. And the online is a culture in its own. Twitter has its own culture and its own set of protocols and ways of working. You only have to look at trolling and how trolls that bring reaction from people to understand that, in fact, there is a way to behave on Twitter. There are cultural norms on Twitter. The same obviously applies to LinkedIn and other environments. There are cultural norms. So linguists have a big part to play in helping people understand. But in order to do that, they need to have the academic bridge extended to them. So one of the things we do, for example, is to make sure that we give people access to the conversations on Twitter by hashtagging certain aspects of the work we're doing, so the clavier hashtag, for example, and bringing those in then through RSS feeds into the VLE. So the staff who are not comfortable with setting up their own account, but still log into our VLE to work, see the conversations that are going on. And it just offers a bridge for people who are not used to working in that way. We have to make things more visible and more reachable, because people are so easily sold the narrative that actually anything that you do in the digital sphere is dangerous. And of course there's danger, but actually to have skills to navigate, it's not so unusual. I think one of the most, for me, the most influential people when I first started this particular journey was Steve Wheeler, who produced many, many years ago a little PowerPoint that is shared on SlideShare. So his open practice helped me access that and see that and become aware of this educational practitioner. And he said, everything I needed to know about Twitter, I think it was, I learned in kindergarten. And I thought that's so true. Actually, if you strip it all back, yes, it's mediated by computers. Yes, it's got that digital aspect that some people find off-putting. The fact I have to log into a channel, or I have to switch a phone on and do something that I'm not used to doing. But actually, these controls that we have on what we say where and how we say them, we're very used to. We went through all of this before we were 7 years old. What is appropriate behaviour? What is acceptable behaviour? And our parents were the mediators that helped us do this. So if we're not modelling this as academics, then we're failing as students. If we're not helping them, and I totally agree with what Eric said about it's not generational. It certainly isn't. I see very effective people navigating these areas who are young and old. It really isn't that simple.
Thank you,
That's my
Teresa.
two pennyworth.
I need to give Claudie a chance to ask a question, and after it's answered, I have to go, unfortunately. So, go ahead, Claudie.
Oh, my question's not related to anything that you've just said, but it's about Twitter, really. On our Twitter feed, I always try to share educational stories that have come from the institution, so interesting research or something that another department's tweeted that I think might be of educational interest, which I don't use on Facebook or LinkedIn for alumni. Now, what worries me is that I'm just sharing everything that I see that I think, well, that'd be interesting, the engineering doing this, or, modern languages, got this lecture on. And it's how do I manage that so that people aren't just seeing this ream of stuff coming that I'm just retweeting, saying, watch this, read that, this is really good, etc. So that alumni can enjoy participating in the learning that's going on at the university without feeling overwhelmed by me throwing everything at them.
Well, it's good that you're asking this question. I think it's one that a lot of people have, and I think part of it is quality always trumps quantity when it comes to social media, because if you're flooding the stream with retweets and other people's content especially, I think that's almost a turnoff in a way to an audience, because they're following you, they're following the content that you're going to give them that is hopefully going to be interesting and fascinating, and it's something that they can't get elsewhere. But before you do all that posting and that creation, you almost have to engage in a marketing and promotions campaign to let people know that your channels exist, to really cultivate and grow an audience. And so, for example, every time you send an email, it's going to have maybe a little bit at the bottom talking about your amazing social media channels and sort of what you're posting. Every time there's a print piece or other sort of content creation that happens maybe on the web, because I think you're right in sharing stories. Stories are much more interesting than just sort of little snippets that are sort of push broadcast type things. What are you doing with regards to photography or videography that shares a narrative about your particular department, your particular academic focus that is of interest, and then always just minimize the push-based stuff. A great example of this comes from outside of higher education, is one of the big brands, one of the major companies that's out there. If you look at Starbucks, for example, on Twitter, regardless of your thoughts about their coffee, if you look at their social presence, they don't push out a lot of content that everybody can see. They only maybe put out 1 or 2 tweets per day that everybody who follows Starbucks can see. They do a lot of engagement, though, with the @mention functionality with their audience, with their customers and constituents. They do that constantly throughout the day. And so I think to cultivate and grow your audience, you send out a few really high-quality choice elements of content, and then engage a lot with those people or those areas on social that you think might be good champions for you or good allies for you. And so, because what you're looking for is other people who are going to retweet your stuff and share your stuff, because your content is so and niche and of real high value to any audience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any final words to say? Because I have to leave and stop the broadcast. Anybody?
Just to say thank you very much for bringing this together, and it's great to meet everybody and have the opportunity to
thank
chat.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mira.
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
you, Teresa and Claudia. Bye. See you all soon. Take care. Bye.